Hello, YouTube. This is the story of my bad mushroom trip. This happened years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Okay, so I used to hang out with these kids. Um, we had a little group. It was me, two of my buddies, and this girl Megan. We all used to hang out at her house in her basement. Now her parents were old hippies, and they had her bedroom was actually a converted grow room, and she had like 27 bongs down there, and it was just like it was just like a stoner's playland in her basement. So we used to go down there and trip out. Well, one day we got a bunch of mushrooms and psilocybe cubensis, and I ate just under an eighth about, and I ate them and I sat down on the couch down there in the basement. Now we had this kid with us, Bill Moynihan was his name. He wasn't part of our normal crew. He was like a fifth wheel. And but he was hanging out with us. He was an alright kid, but he just wasn't like he was like an outsider in the group. But I took the mushrooms. I sat down and say maybe an hour later, it really started to peak. And sitting there, I was looking down at the floor, and then I hear somebody. It was Bill Moynihan, and he said, "You're gonna throw up?" And I wasn't gonna throw up. I didn't feel sick at all. I don't know why he asked that, but right when he said that, I looked up at him, and his face had turned purple, except for the tip of his nose, the edges of his ears, and the tip of his chin were green, purple and green, and he made this really goofy fucking expression. Like, I looked at him like what the fuck are you talking about? Am I gonna throw up? And he goes, this really stupid expression, this dumb laugh, and it was just like the thought of vomiting and then looking at his fucking face, and it was like mind over matter. Like, I thought about it, and like my stomach just did a flip, and right at that point, yeah, I did feel like I was about to throw up. So I was like, oh, and the like my I could feel the blood just rush out of my face. Like, I went pale, started sweating, and I got up and I was like, I don't feel good, and I started walking to the stairs to go up to the upper floor out of the basement. And it was like my legs were really weak, and it felt like I was walking on like wet spaghetti noodles instead of like my own legs. So I'm like walking to the stairs, and I go up the stairs, and I put one foot on the stairs, and I look up, and it was like the whole stairwell turned into this like tunnel that was like a mile long, with the door down at the other end. Now, I knew in my mind I was just tripping my face off and it wasn't real. So I started walking up the stairs, and she had like the paint on the walls had like these like round swirlies, like, you know painted into it, like you took a paintbrush and swirled it. And there was dozens of them all over the wall. Now, these things turned into like spinning vortexes that went into the wall, and it went from dozens to hundreds of them, just all little spinning vortexes going into the wall. And that just like was like, whoa, it blew my mind. But I was still feeling really sick, so I kept going upstairs. And right when I get to the top of the stairs, I go to grab the doorknob. The door swings open, and her mom sticks her head around the corner, and she's like, Megan! And she didn't know I was there. She was just reaching in and calling down for her daughter. But it startled me, and it blew my mind, because it looked like her head just came out of the wall. And she's like, Megan! And I was just like, whoa, and she looked at me, and now she was an old hippie. She knew all about the psychedelic experience. So she looked at me, and I think she knew what was up, but she was like, you okay? And I was like, I didn't want to let on. So I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I just need some fresh air. She's like, well, go ahead, go get fresh air. So I go to start walking through the kitchen, and at this point, the weakness in my legs was getting really intense, and I couldn't make it all the way across the kitchen. So I just flopped down in the kitchen chair at the table. And at this point, like, I started getting like really strong waves of nausea, like I was about to hurl all over a kitchen table. I didn't want to do that, so I don't know, like, the only way I could deal with it was to like rock back and forth and do this like chanting thing where I was like, oh, 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 right? And like, I realized consciously that I was acting like a fucking weirdo, so I just decided I was gonna force myself to stop doing that. So I sat back in the chair like this, and I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden I could feel these like waves of energy pushing down through my body, and I could feel it pulsating and going through my body from above me down out through the bottom, and it was from head to toe. And the thought crossed my mind that this energy was pushing my soul out of my body, and it was going downward instead of upward, so it must have been pulling me down to hell. And that thought scared the shit out of me. And then it was at that point I realized I wasn't breathing. So I sat up and like gasped a lung full of air, kind of like if you're like coming out from under the water after a long time. I was just like, you know. And I stood up, and I got the strength, like the weakness in my legs had gone. I scared myself, and I had the energy to just run out back. Now I live in Massachusetts, and this was the dead of winter, and it was like 2 degrees below zero outside. But I get out there, and the first thing I start doing is taking my shirt off. And I got down, I took my sweater off, my t-shirt, and I was bare-chested out in this freezing weather. But I was still like burning up, you know, and it was just like waves of steam pouring off of me. And I'm out there, I'm like, okay, I'm here, I'm taking deep breaths, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? So then I realized I had to take a leak, you know. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna take a piss. So I go over to next to the shed in their backyard, whip it out, and I start going, you know. And it occurred to me like, oh, I should write my name in the snow. So I start writing my name. I did it. I wrote my name in the snow in cursive. Now, by the time I had finished that, I think just focusing on that task sort of helped me out. It distracted me from the bad trip that I was going through. And, you know, I zipped up, put it back, and, you know, and then I realized that it was fucking cold out. So I started putting my clothes back on, my shirts, and I went back inside. Now, going back into the heat, all of a sudden, like, I started to get the waves of nausea again. It was like it hit me all of a sudden, but not as strong, but it was coming back. So I go back inside, and this time, Megan's mother was in the kitchen, and she saw me come in, and this time it was in the light, and she looked right in my eyes, and at that point, it was like, there was like silent communication, and she knew I was tripping my face off, and I was having a hard time dealing. And she went right into action. Like, it was like she knew exactly what to do. She was like, oh, hey, honey, come over here, sit down, you know. And she sat me down she brought me in the living room, sat me down on the couch. She's like, do you want a Coke? And she went, I didn't even answer her, but she went and she got me a can of Coca-Cola, popped it open and handed it to me. And, you know, and I was sitting there with the Coke, and I got this like feeling that she was like my nurse, you know, like she was like the school nurse, like when you feel sick and the school nurse gives you peanut butter crackers and it cures you, you know. It's like this can of Coke was like everything I needed. So she gave me the Coke, and she's like, I'll be right back. And then she went downstairs to where my friends were. I assume she went down to ask them what the fuck I was on, you know, but she left me there for a minute. And then around the corner, the family dog came, and it was this little Sheltie. They had this little Sheltie named Tawny. I don't know if you guys know what a Sheltie looks like, but it's like a little collie, you know, like a little lassie. But it didn't look like a dog, you know, because when you're tripping, you see these vivid colors, and you can see like detail and texture and everything. And when I looked at the dog, it didn't look like a dog. It looked like some wild, like, woodland creature just wandered into the house and came to visit me, you know. So I was like, oh, hey, Tawny, you know. And the dog just runs up to me, and like, I swear it like smiled at me, you know. It just like did that thing, you know, like dogs do. But it looked like it smiled at me, and like I got this feeling that the dog knew I was sick or whatever, and came to help me out. So I had the Coke, and I had my little woodland creature with me, and I was and I felt like connected with the dog, like we were both like critters, you know, and we were just like grooving. So at that point I realized, like, okay, it's not so bad, like I'm better, you know. Now I'm still tripping my face off, but I was cured, you know. It was like the Coke, the dog, the nurse. I was fixed, you know. So I went back downstairs and had a good time for the rest of the day, you know. But I swear, man, if I could go back and punch Bill Moynihan in his face, I would.